This episode is brought to you by the Harry Butler Institute at Murdoch University.
Hey, I'm just quickly jumping in here before we get into today's conversation. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Click that little bell button to get notified when the new episodes come out. And if you'd like to support Paramount Importance even further, please check out our website, paramountimportance.com. We've got some awesome merch there. They've got these cool shirts, these cool hats, all environmentally friendly and the highest quality we could go. It generally helps us keep on doing what we are doing, spreading the word of science, inspiring a whole bunch more people. It really helps us out. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Let's go. Paramount Importance. Today we're not talking about those things.
No.
We are going to a whole new area of science that I've talked about birds before, but I've never talked about their habitats. Well, their habitats where they spend probably most of their time or a large portion of their time. We're going into the air. We've got Professor Judy from the University of Amsterdam, who has been brought over by the Harry Butler Institute. You're over here during a visiting scholar lecture series. How have you found your time here? And I'll delve into your area of research in a second, but Have you enjoyed WA?
Oh, I've loved it. It's my first time in Australia, first of all, and it's absolutely stunning here. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful landscape. People are really nice, though the weather is spectacular. It's amazing to be able to walk out of your house and go swimming or see endless skies. Yeah, I find it wonderful. Really, really wonderful.
Is the nature kind of similar to Holland, or is
Not at all.
No,
not at all. So first of all, having this kind of bush landscape here where you have this open habitats, these different types of trees, the plants are completely different. The birds are totally different. I mean, waking up to parrots calling in your background is
it's quite
very
iconic.
foreign. Yeah, I mean, in Amsterdam we have parakeets. They don't belong there, but they are there. But I mean, the scale here, the numbers of individuals, the plants are spectacular. The size of the spiders is definitely different. Yeah.
I did do a spider podcast at the end of last year, and they were phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'll call it the secret life of spiders. Like, they do so many different things. There is spiders in the air, in the habitat that we're going to talk about today.
Of course,
in the air.
ballooning spiders.
Yeah.
I know. That's pretty cool, right?
Crazy.
Send up a string and then they go off.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you see that in your science when like a bird's feeding on them in the air? I would imagine
for
so.
sure. Oh, for sure. We have episodes in Holland at the end of June when it's pretty relatively warm for us, at least, not for you. We have periods where we have flying ants. So the queen ants are going out of their colonies, and ants they have wings and they're suddenly flying, and you see swarms of birds, big flocks, just foraging and eating on them in the sky because all their food, like lunch, is in the air. That's really, and if you suddenly see very particular behavior, okay, they're definitely flying ants in the air.
Yeah. Are they quite accurate with their hunting styles in the air?
It depends. So you've got some that are really like looking and picking food, and you have others that are like aerial planktivores. So swifts that just open their mouths.
Yeah.
They have little like whiskers, and they just suck in whatever, a little bit like whale sharks.
Wait, the birds have whiskers.
Yeah. It's feathers, but they're feathers that are like little whiskers at the tips of their bills. And it helps them funnel food in, so really small insects.
Right. Yeah, right. So we call that feeding the Marines say ram feeding.
Yeah.
Like that's whale
Same
sharks,
thing. Exactly, whale shark.
anchovies.
Yeah. Same thing.
Just open your mouth and go forward.
Exactly. And
Birds do that too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. It's going to be extremely
You're
exciting.
going to have fun, I hope.
Oh,
Right?
definitely. There's going to be so many different things. Well, let's start broad. What is aeroecology, and what role can ecological research play in the biodiversity conservation and policy? Very big questions.
Yeah. So let me start first. So what is aeroecology? You could consider it a really niche. It's a very small or narrow field on the one hand, not that many people doing it. It's basically studying life in the air. So it's studying the animals that can be birds, insects, the spiders you talked about, bats. It's how they move in the air, how they use the environment, which is very, very dynamic. I mean, people look at it and think that it's something static, but it's moving all the time. It's changing all the time. How species interact in that environment, where they are, where they're trying to go. So that's kind of broad field of aeroecology. Your second part was what can it do for conservation, right? Like what can we do for policy conservation? I think we don't realize that the air for most animals, they've evolved in an area where they don't have a lot of interference in the air, right? Not the largest structures are the trees, and there's nothing else there. But humans are now putting, objects in the air, tall skyscrapers, wind turbines, a lot of aviation. So animals somehow have to deal with all of that human activity in the air. Humans also have to deal with all those animals, right? So it can be a problem for aviation safety. And if you know what's moving around, when animals are moving, how they move, then you can make conservation decisions. So you can try and reduce those conflicts that could occur in the aerial environment. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, definitely. It's a very simple question, but it's something that's been on my mind for a long time. How often does a plane collect birds?
Often.
Right.
Probably more often than people want to know. It can be quite often. For the most part, nothing happens. So if you imagine like the size of an aircraft and the size of a bird and also the mass, so it has to do with a mass relationship between the two and the speed, then a lot of times aircraft, especially when taking off and landing. So one of the things that we learn in aeroecology is we try and understand the aerial distribution of animals, right? So how high do they actually fly? What times of day? We know that aircraft, especially like civil aircraft, the first few minutes of flight when you're taking off and when you're landing, you're still really within that air layer where all of those birds and bats are. Often collisions will just result in death of the animal and like a blood smear or something. But if you're really unlucky, an engine can ingest a few birds at a time. And that can be really problematic. That doesn't happen so often.
Right. Okay. So is it like how high are the planes flying? Because when I was delving into the research, the great snipe flies at
Yeah,
8,000 meters.
yeah, very unusual, but it can do that. So civil aircraft, eventually they'll get up if you're doing like a transatlantic flight to 30,000 feet. So that's higher than most. That's much higher than most birds. But whenever the aircraft are around the airfield, and especially when they're doing like their taxiing movements in the air and so on, they are still in those layers. I mean, most animals are in the lowest, let's say, 1,000 meters of airspace. If you're flying in a helicopter, you're flying in that space for sure. If you're military aircraft and doing low-level training, then you're flying very often at those low altitudes. And drones nowadays are also flying in the same space. So that's something that's pretty new. And there are a lot of drones out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we use drones for work.
All the time,
we use drones for filming. Yeah, very, very common practice these days. Well, you've mentioned it briefly. What about wind farms? That is a very hot topic at the moment, especially locally in the Southwest. And as we are pushing for more green energy sources, what are the implications for birds?
Yeah, so that's something that there are a lot of people now working on that topic, trying to understand really. So you have to imagine you have these big, tall structures made out of metal that are in an environment the aerial environment where they don't really belong. So birds, bats, we don't really know yet to what extent they really recognize those as something dangerous or something they should avoid. They're much taller than trees, right? The biggest turbines now, technologically, the rotor tip can reach 300 meters.
Wow.
That is really, really high.
For, I think, the Carry tree, which is the tallest tree in the Southwest or even Australia, it's like 100 meters or 90 meters.
Wow, see, I don't even know. And even that is amazing, right? Most trees, I think most mature trees in many temperate places are 30 meters, right? So suddenly 300 is really high.
I might need to be fact checked on that one, but
yeah,
I think
yeah, no, I actually don't. So I don't know about it. I'm hoping to go and see them in a week or so. No, so for some species, we do know that that birds do collide with them. These rotor tips can turn really fast, and they can't see them. If they can't see them while they're flying, or they can't avoid the turbines, then they collide. So that's a problem. So there's a problem with mortality. Another problem is wind turbines are often not in isolation. So they're organized in wind farms or wind parks, depending on the terminology that you use. So you get an array, it can be in a line or it can be in a kind of field. And then it causes a lot of turbulence. It causes disturbance. And then we see that some species will even avoid entire areas. So they have to either fly over or fly around. And that causes extra energy expenditure. So it's harder for birds to move around.
If Is it potentially a better thing though to have them all in one area if it's creating that turbulence for them to avoid than just having like one or two in an area
Yeah.
and then them going through it and getting
So that's a question we get asked a lot. Like nowadays, there's a lot of development over the North Sea,
Mhm.
where I'm coming from. Really big wind farms, really large areas. So they're curious. They have similar questions like, okay, would it make sense if we made a corridor? Would birds fly through it? If we arranged it in a particular construction? We just don't know. Like those are great questions. It's very hard to test. So we're just now starting to learn because you have to study the behavior while the wind turbines are going up, while these kind of wind farms are still pretty new. Like we've had low turbines, before. Um, I don't know yet. I don't have an answer, but those are the
Mhm.
kind of questions that we get for conservation.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine there's so many
It's
different
really
variables
challenging.
to
Yeah.
think of. Well, like one of the other things that surprised me when I was delving into the research is that one of the studies you found that a lot of offshore flight altitudes are 13% to 20% lower than those over land. Why are birds flying closer to the water surface than when they are offshore?
Yeah. So we don't know for sure. Something that you see over land also is that birds seem to, in open habitats, they seem to fly at night. So this is migration that's occurring at night in the dark. They seem to fly lower to the surface when they're in open landscapes, and when they're in areas with more um, kind of trees, clutter, more things in the environment, they'll tend to fly a little bit higher, probably for safety, right? So if you start seeing that there are mountains and hills, then it's better to fly above them than to constantly being altering your altitude, especially if you can't see a lot. But when there's nothing, then they can just stay low. There's less turbulence, and winds also aren't as strong. So in our region, sometimes birds have to fly quite low because wind speeds above are not only higher, but they're in the wrong direction. So if you
Mm.
fly lower, there's less resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know for sure. It's all us trying to think about why do we think. So if we understand the morphology, the physiology of a species, trying to interpret what we see, but we don't know for sure 100% why. Why do they fly lower?
Right. Uh, is it like the higher you go, the air is less dense, right? So
Yes.
it's also if there was no stronger winds up as high you
Yeah,
go.
it would be that. So there's benefits. So in some places, for example, in the desert, it's been found that birds will fly higher. It's
Mm.
cooler because it's cooler. It's less dense, so it also costs less energy to fly when you fly higher. So, yeah, there are these trade-offs that are being made apparently, and we have to try and figure out how that balances out to understand the decisions that these birds are taking.
Is it like how bad are? This is a very hard one to answer, I guess. But like, are wind farms a major problem for birds? Like,
Yeah,
because
that's
like there's a lot of arguments for people pushing back
against.
against
I
wind farms.
know for some birds it seems like no, and I think the other. I could flip around the question: is climate change a big problem for birds?
Mm.
It's a
Yeah.
really big problem for birds. Really, really, really
But then
big
there could be
problem.
alternate, like this is a different question to
Yeah,
what
yeah,
we're doing,
yeah.
like alternate sources, like whether solar power is a better thing or
Yeah,
something like
but it's
that.
hard. So that's I think that in the end we are as humans we are changing so many things at an
Mm.
incredible pace, and we have to do something about it. Wind turbines, yes, they have some negative impacts, but on the other hand, I at least think that the positive impacts are going to outweigh the negative impacts that they have on nature. So they are a problem for some species, and then there are mitigation. So there are things you can do to reduce the negative impacts, and that's where conservation comes in.
Mm.
And that's where your understanding can be helpful because then you can make smarter or more sustainable design or more sustainable operation of wind turbines. Um, yeah, in the end, I still think that that's going to be better than the impacts that you'll have with if you don't do anything, right? If you don't try and go more towards carbon neutral.
Mm. What about where you put the wind farms, say offshore, like
Yeah.
on water to on land?
Yeah, so that's where you can, you depending on the region you're in and depending on the species that you're talking about, that's where you can also make different types of decisions. In the Netherlands, for example, there's a lot of development. There's a lot of development going on offshore, also onshore, but onshore there's a lot less space. That because there's so many restrictions about people, about other impacts that you might have, not just on wildlife. Um, Offshore, one of the decisions that's been made is, for example, so we know these migratory species pass through. Um, we don't know if they avoid or not, but what you can do is try and turn off the wind turbines during these moments of peak migration to reduce collisions. Is that better than putting them on land? Yeah, it depends on which species you're trying to protect.
Mm.
You have different species in different places. Species that breed, for example, really slowly, so large birds of prey that have one egg a year, yeah, that can have an impact if you lose one individual, more than if you have a small bird that has 10 eggs a year
Mm.
and reproduces really quickly.
Yeah, well, I guess it's going to be different for each country. I was going to ask about
Yeah.
is this taken into consideration? But each country will have its
Yeah,
own policies. I think
exactly.
around this.
I think it is. So to some extent, I hope that it's taken into a consideration. I think it does very much depend on the country. It depends on the underlying policies. And then there's all kinds of, I mean, that's something we've learned by talking to people that are working in industry. I can come there as a scientist and tell them, oh, yeah, but birds are really important. But then they've got other constraints like all the infrastructure they have to, they have to put in place to make sure we get the energy wherever they're going to put these turbines. That also has to be considered. There's all kinds of, so when you're talking about marine environments, I'm talking about the air, but of course there's a lot going on underwater as well. So all of these things have to be somehow combined to really try and make the best decisions. And you hope that policy, industry, government, that together they're trying to weigh everything and then make the best choices.
Good word, hope.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there particular species or behavioral traits that make some birds more vulnerable to these wind turbines? Or like that may, well,
Yeah.
I think you've briefly touched on
Touch
that.
upon it a little bit. So, I mean, one of the things is the flight altitudes, right? So if birds don't fly within the area of these turning rotors, then there usually isn't a big problem. If they're spending most of their time above, right? But for the most part, most birds actually do fly in these lower air layers. Another thing is how much time a bird might spend in that space, in that airspace. So in general, what we see and what we consider is that birds that use relatively slow flight and slow, like climbing flight, so raptors, birds of prey, I don't know if you've watched them flying, as the air heats up during the day and it starts rising, these birds spread their wings. They have this beautiful flight where they start climbing in circles.
I did see one of the coolest interactions on the farm growing up. We were herding in some cattle, and then I could see this. I'm going to think it was called a peregrine falcon, flying really high up, and then I've just forgotten the name. It's called a grey, some grey bird. It's called grey something. I've just forgotten it, but that was flying a lot lower, and we just sort of like my cousin and I were like just driving the motorbikes, and I don't know why we're both sort of looking that direction, but you just see
you saw it
completely dive,
amazing,
and hit the grey bird, and then sort of like just kept on flying, and then the grey bird just come plummeting down to the ground, and we're just like, whoa, did that? And then
but you saw like one of these amazing events.
Yeah, it was awesome. We drove over to the bird, and it was dead,
very dead,
dead, and we're just like, wow.
yeah. I mean, the peregrine falcons, that is such an amazing. Can you imagine like what an amazing tactic that is? Flies high above the birds, it finds its target, and then it dives down at it's like the fastest diving bird there is. Dives down at incredible speeds, knocks the bird out of the sky, and that's it.
Yeah. It was crazy.
So that is crazy. Yeah, but then no. So I'm now imagine. So the peregrines don't do this that much, but if you've got like these large eagle species or large kites. If they flap their wings, it's really expensive. They're big, heavy birds. So they use these thermal convections and they fly really slow and they'll spend a long time climbing up. So you can imagine if they're moving around a turbine, they're circling back and forth, and the chance that they might get hit by a turbine could be higher. Birds that can't maneuver very fast are considered also sometimes more vulnerable to being hit by a turbine. So these are some of the things that we think make them more or less vulnerable. Also, their vision. That's something that's not studied that much. I think people are starting to pay more attention to that. To what extent do they actually, because birds' eyes, for many of them, they're on the sides of their heads. We're used to looking forward and seeing like around us, so they have a very different field of view. And when they're flying, they're often looking down. They're not looking like straight ahead. So how does that impact whether or not they see a turbine.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And you mentioned that it changes the disturbance in the air. So like
Yeah.
they're used to the thermal convection.
Right.
How like big a space does those say like a wind farm move the air around? Like is it
Hundreds
like
of
I imagine like in the ocean you can see the eddies,
yeah.
like the spiraling, the water
Right.
moving. Is that kind of happening in a big scale in the air? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
there are people that are doing a lot of research on that. I mean, that's one of the things that's definitely and again we're kind of behind, we're a little bit behind trying to catch up. We don't know how that's going to affect birds, but yeah, it creates large eddies of turbulence behind the turbines. It reduces, of course, the wind speed, right?
Mm.
Because you're extracting wind, you're extracting that energy from the environment, so wind speed is
Right.
slower behind the turbines, but you also get a turbulent eddy behind. Depends on the weather. So apparently these eddies, I mean, that's why often in wind parks, they'll put turbines about 700, 800 meters apart, like behind each other, so that they can still get enough energy in the next turbine. But you can get certain weather conditions where these, there are long trails of impact, like kilometers away from a wind farm. So
Right. I
we
wonder if
don't,
that
yeah.
like disturbs the like pollen of
Yeah,
like plants and
probably.
moves them around.
Yeah,
in
I don't know.
different,
We don't.
like you might one day just see like this corridor of like a certain species
Yeah,
and
there
shifting patterns of that.
there's some beautiful images. If you like, I'm pretty sure if you Google it, you could probably find like looking for wind parks offshore and eddies behind the wind parks. Yeah, they can be really, really like create clouds behind the.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like what was it adiabatic and katabatic? Oh no, that's different. That's
Yeah, that's
heat.
around mountains and so
Yeah,
on.
that's
That's
around
heat.
yeah.
And that's heat and so on. But those kind of conditions can
Right.
influence the amount of turbulence. Might start influencing precipitation. I mean, it's
Wow.
interesting. But that's when you're talking about not a single turbine, but when you're talking about these really, really big wind farms with large turbines, large numbers of turbines. They can start impacting the area. Yeah, the airspace basically around them. So the habitat that we're studying.
Yeah. Crazy. It's it's a whole like it's relatively new science. So I think
It's
there's
very
a
new,
lot
yeah.
of things are like not well understood quite yet.
Yeah.
Like your group, like you're a world leading expert in this area. Your group's like led predicting bird movement to reduce collisions. What were some of the predictions?
Yeah, so the way our models work, we basically look at the influence of weather on. So birds are very reliant on weather to travel. Basically, they're moving, hundreds of kilometers a night. As a bird, it's important that you're safe, so that if you're passing over an area, you can pass safely. You don't want to spend too much energy, but you also don't want to spend too much time. So we study how weather influences them. So we can see that also overseas. So one of the things we didn't know is we've been working on migration over land for quite some time. And we didn't know if the behaviors are really similar offshore or not, or if weather really influences them in the same way. So one of the predictions that we've made with these models is that we can see that weather in the areas where birds depart from is probably just as important as the weather is over the sea where we actually measure them, right? So they make decisions before taking off, and that kind of determines whether or not you'll see them offshore.
So are they getting a sense of what the weather is offshore? Like, so
Yeah.
I know this is quite important. I just want to make sure the audience knows, like, say shorebirds, they can't rest on water. They
No.
have to continuously fly.
Exactly.
So weather greatly impacts them.
Tremendously. And we're studying not just shorebirds, which are pretty fast flyers, and we're studying really small songbirds. So they weigh 10 grams, 15 grams, like
Right.
small little animals.
Very easy to get picked up by the wind. And
Very easy to get picked up by the winds. They fly at about the same speed as the wind blows. So they have to make good decisions. If they fly in winds that are too strong or blowing in the wrong direction, they can get blown off course. Can be really bad if you're going overseas. So we really see that they make decisions before crossing a shoreline, whether or not it's the right time to go. And that's what enables us to predict whether or not they're going to be seen offshore at a particular time.
What are sort of some of the triggers for them to be like, they can't check a weather app. So
No, they can't check a weather app. Although sometimes I think probably they can. Like evolutionarily, they must have some sense of weather, which is better than
They
ours.
sense pressure.
Yeah,
I'm
so that we do
assuming.
know that they have organs that sense pressure to some extent. What we've found as the predictors are changes in wind speed and direction. Also, precipitation is something they do not like, so they don't fly often in the rain. So if it starts raining, they won't take off.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, so for example, in our area in autumn, unfortunately for the birds, the wind is blowing most of the time in the wrong direction. So we do see that they'll wait till the winds change, but they can't wait the entire season. So that's also funny. Like sometimes we'll see them leaving still in what we would consider, oh, those aren't great conditions, but it's better than what it normally is. So they'll wait. So if, for example, winds are blowing in the wrong direction, they can't always wait until it's going in the right direction, but they'll wait till the winds die down a bit so that they can at least correct their flight, right? That the wind isn't blowing as strong as they're trying to fly.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like it's really
Yeah.
incredible when you think about these tiny little birds with brains like the size of a peanut.
Yeah. Making big decisions. And what about when a storm does hit over in the
Yeah.
ocean they're flying? What do they do? Do they avoid it? Do they
Yeah, no,
turn around? What?
there are anecdotes that the answer would be yes, all of the above. So for the most part, it looks like when there are really big really big things moving through that they wait till before they pass.
Well, some of these birds are like crossing the equator, going from continent to continent. Like
Yeah,
they wouldn't
thousands
be able
of kilometers.
to, Yeah, they wouldn't be able to tell
No.
like a weather system
Before.
Yeah.
So there's some amazing work, actually birds that migrate from like Australia, New Zealand, all the way up to Alaska that do these incredible, so some of these waders that do these incredible flights, godwits, they travel 10,000 kilometers without stopping. It's the most incredible migration there is. We still don't know how they do it, but scientists, so I haven't done this, but other scientists have worked on these species where they have found that they are able to make choices about their day of departure, that they make it all the way across without getting blown off course by some cyclone. We don't know how they do it. There are some weather systems that are teleconnected, it's called. So there's a connection between what happens across continents.
And they pick up
Maybe, but we don't know how. We have seen birds sometimes fly in storms, though, over the North Sea. So like now we're talking smaller scale of hundreds of kilometers. If a bird makes a right choice, it can use a storm. So if they're on the right side of a storm, they can travel really, really fast, much faster than going in a straight line. They'll go around. Like if you watch, the weather in these huge turning systems. Now imagine you pick it up at the right place and you get whipped around.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get there really fast.
in a flock of birds, would it be like some would make that decision? Like, is there a few cowboy birds and they're like, let's go for it? Or is it like, are they kind of like, if one goes, they all go?
We really don't know.
Okay.
That's great questions. We really, really don't know. We don't see them on the ground, so we don't. So, and when we're looking, we study with radar. So with radar, we just have these blips on the screen, so we don't really know if there's interactions among the individuals.
Yeah. Okay.
People are starting to look at that with acoustics. So listening to their calls, are they talking to each other more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I filmed a documentary with BirdLife Australia. Was it late 2024, which should come out this year? Where we worked with godwits, like all these shorebirds.
Yeah.
It was like partly to track their movements on their feeding areas, but also with the avian influenza, since it hasn't reached Australia yet, from what I know of. But yeah, we did learn, like, that was my first experience with birds. We did cannon netting, which was extremely exciting, and no idea that's how it's like really cool science, like shooting cannons.
To catch a big flock of birds.
Yeah, out of the ground.
Yeah.
That was a very unique experience. So I'm just going to plug that doco out there if people want to watch that soon. Hopefully should be up when this comes up. I don't know yet. But well, we've talked about a lot of the traits and of birds. Now, how do you know all this? So what technologies do you know? Do you use? And your research often combines weather radar data with GPS tracking. Like, how do you figure all this out?
Yeah. That's how do, and then I think, oh, and then I don't even know that much because half your questions I can't even answer. But no, so we really are reliant on technology, and the funny thing is scientists are often quite poor. So we're really lucky if technology is developed somewhere else for someone else, and then we can kind of steal it and borrow it into our own realm. So we indeed use GPS tracking a lot. A lot of the technology that's in your phone that everybody uses every day, we just pull it out, basically stick it back together and create really cool small tags that can measure exactly where an animal is. You can change the settings while it's on an animal. So I can say, all right, I really need high resolution data now. Give me information every 3 seconds.
Mm.
I want to conserve my battery because we're not charging it every night.
Mm.
I want to conserve my battery, measure every half an hour. These tags that we use, they have an accelerometer on it. So I don't know, most people don't really know what an accelerometer is, but everyone has them. So if you, in your phone, if you're counting like your steps, or if as your phone rotates, when you turn your phone and it flips from landscape to portrait, that's just using one of these sensors. It measures motion.
Yeah, like how you can judge how fast you're
Yeah,
walking and
all of
all
that.
that stuff.
We
Yeah.
use all of that to tell you what a bird is doing. Is it
Cool.
walking? Is it standing? Is
Mhm.
it lying down? Is it flapping its wings? How fast is it flapping its wings? So it's all of that standard technology. It's just repurposed. We use radar a lot. So we use weather radars. Weather radars are used mainly to measure the rain, to measure incoming storms, things like that. They measure water, and birds have a lot of water in them. So they're picked up really nicely by these radars.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Has a storm ever been confused for a flock of birds?
Yeah. So, I mean, the story goes the first time, there's a story from World War II that the first time that people identified birds on radar, this was, oh, now I forgot their names. It's terrible. It's very unfair. Um, they basically they were confused by what it was, right? So they were called angels because they didn't know. So they saw objects and were trying to figure out, okay, is it an aircraft? It's flying too slow, but it's kind of big. Is it, what is there in the air? Is it a UFO? We don't know. But that was the first time, and they were only allowed to research that. So at some point, they were able to, because there were ornithologists there working on the radars, to finally confirm that they were birds that they were looking at, which they only published after the war because
Right.
it was all secret using military
Of
equipment.
course.
And since then, it's been used as a technology to study bird movement.
Right.
But it's really, yeah. But of
Yeah.
course, things get confused. So storms sometimes we see things in the air where we also just still really don't know what it is. Is it a swarm of insects? Is it
Mm.
weather? Is it dust? Is it a fire? You have to try and separate all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's one of my other questions is like, how do you
How do you
differentiate
do that?
between like big insects, bats, birds?
Yeah. Some of them get all mixed up.
Yeah.
Some of them we still don't have the technology to distinguish them. Oftentimes it's the other basic knowledge that we already have that we can use to separate things. So we know something about the speed that animals move at, about their relative size, and we can use that to separate them. We know that animals that are flying during the day usually fly in much clearer structures. You've got all these soaring birds that their movement patterns look very different than birds flying at night that are all flapping their wings and flying in these like loose kind of flocks. So the image would look different. And we
Mm.
use that to separate. And then there are people doing really hard work in the fields trying to validate, like watching at the same time as you see a radar image to kind of basically train machine learning models or AI models to also pull out those patterns that we start to recognize as an expert, but you can't go through all of that data yourself.
We were doing something very similar with the sonars and fish.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very similar to sonar. It's the same thing, just the other direction.
Yeah. And what do you use that then for? Like, because
Yeah.
like how like I can understand the really fine scale data you get from the GPS
Yeah.
tracking, but say radars, what is that telling you?
Okay, so radar is telling me something all of this fine scale tracking doesn't tell me, which is how many birds are in the air at the same time. It's like the only technology where you can say, okay, there are now 10 birds in the air, and now there are 10,000 birds in the air. So I can measure really big peaks of mass movement, and I can tell you or estimate the numbers.
And is this like a global scale? Like how?
It could be if we could
integrate.
tap into all of
Yeah.
the radars that are there.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be. So that's also something we're working on. So you've got different types of radars. You've got military radars. Those are often really hard to access unless you have the right connections. But these weather radars, these are often used for public service. So they're used by our meteorological institutes, national services. In the U.S., that radar data is free. It's open access. So anyone can use it. In Europe, it's different. In Australia, it's also different. So the radars are there. It's about influencing policy. It's about getting people to understand, okay, that data is not only valuable for rain, for storm, for flood predictions. It's really valuable for predicting how many animals are going to be in the air at a specific time of the year.
Imagine if we all got along.
Oh, it's like so cool.
Yeah.
Just imagine you would watch the news, you'd see the weather report, and then you'd see, and now is the bird migration report. Here is our insect report. Like, wouldn't that be cool?
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
That would be a great way. I think that would inspire a lot of younger people as well.
I think so.
As we mentioned before, jumping on here, the power of education and inspiration. If that's just a common thing, it's like, oh, look, the godwits are migrating now.
Yeah, now
Like,
you can see them off the coast.
Yeah.
Now you can see them.
Yeah, like there's a lot of hype that around when meteors are coming. Like,
yeah,
kind of be cool if the great snipes are coming.
Exactly.
Or
yeah, my favorite bird, it's almost here, Or
Yeah.
I don't know anything about birds, but wow, I can't see them. But did you know there are 10,000 birds in the air? Yeah.
I really hope that happens.
So do I.
That's really cool. Like, yeah.
In my lifetime, I'm also still hoping it's going to be on the news just after the weather.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if
Or just before.
I don't know. News is kind of, well, I guess news has changed. I guess it can be on social media. Like,
Social media is fine. Also fine.
yeah. Yeah. I think really hope that happens.
Yeah, maybe you can help.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how to access the data, but if maybe there's some
You never
way.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to have that on part of my channels.
That would be cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good idea. I'm going to see if I can see what I
Like
can do
show
with that.
people what sonar looks like if you did it,
Mm.
stuff like that. That it's really cool to see like, oh yeah, you can use this technology and then you can see what animals are doing. It's amazing.
Yeah. All right. That's a great idea. I'm going to add that definitely
Cool.
into it. Yeah. So I've read some of your papers where you use weather surveillance radar, broad scale movements, and phenological patterns of aerial organisms such as insects, bats, birds. But recently you've used the US NextRad radar network to study those bird migration over continental. Can you explain the difference between what you're using to the new NextRad?
Yeah. So actually, I don't work. I've only collaborated on one paper or so with the NextRad system. Most of the time, we use the European system, but they're really similar.
Okay.
So basically, they're using the same kind of weather radars. These are Doppler radars. So they it's basically sending out an electromagnetic pulse. It hits an object, it bounces back, and there are calculations about the time it takes to reach the sensor again. And that information is used to give you information about the size of the object, but also the direction and how it's moving. I think the power of NextRad is the fact that they have this national network and they make the data available. And that's why it's been so powerful in the US, because the biologists that are working there with weather radar just have access to the data. Whereas in Europe, we're still trying to collect it from the different meteorological institutes. It's not harmonized as well. So there's a lot more work that has to be done before you can do the science.
Right. Okay. You mentioned like the fundamental aerial niche is shaped by the physiology. How do factors like wing morphology, aspect ratio, and oxygen availability at high altitudes dictate whether a species can fly? So we briefly have touched on that.
That's it.
So it's like, what is what? So you've used
Right.
like we talked about the heat convection with the big raptor species.
Exactly. So that's one of the examples. Their morphology plays a huge role, right? So these large birds, it's not only that flight is expensive because they're big and they're heavy, but their wing shape, so that has to do with their aspect ratio or the relationship between the total surface area of their wings and their mass, determines whether or not they can actually use soaring flight. So can they use this warm rising air to fly up? Birds like that don't fly at night because it's too expensive for them, because they would have to fly their wings. So they don't have any thermal convection. The godwits that you talked about, they have very different wings. So their wings don't have the right shape to soar. They can't. So they're constantly flapping their wings. Costs a tremendous amount of energy. So they spend a lot of time getting really, really fat, like obese,
Mm-hmm.
so that they have big energy stores, and then they can do that nonstop flight.
Why have they not evolved, like especially if they're covering huge distances, to be able to soar?
They wouldn't be able to cross the oceans. Like
Right.
it's amazing. It all fits together. No, so I don't know. That's the beauty of birds, that you've got all of these different types of flight modes that have evolved for different reasons, either for how they search for food or the type of environment that they live in. And then migration is just a part of it, but it's not it's not what they're doing all year round. Most of the time they're around one area to breed, they're around another area maybe to spend, the non-breeding season. And then
Getting
they
fat.
need their wings for other stuff, catching food.
Yeah. Well, like the swallows, like the willy wagtails,
Yeah.
like those species, like their wing shapes are different again. Like they need
Yeah.
to be evolved to very, very quick darting movements.
Exactly. Exactly. So they've got these kind of like little triangular shaped wings. Their flight isn't too expensive, but they can maneuver really quickly, right? If you see a really big eagle, they don't maneuver really fast. You've got these little swallows that can tip and turn and have these fast turning angles because they have to dart after insects in the air. Then they have really maneuverable wings. They've got beautiful tails that they can open and close, so they can suddenly stop their flight in the air, turn around. Yeah.
Right. Okay. What about pigeons and gulls, like the silver gull that we have here?
Yeah.
What did they evolve to be like?
So the pigeons are interesting. Pigeons have evolved to try and get away from peregrine falcons. So if they get dive bombed by a falcon and they're hit on the tail, their tail will like explode and fall out of there. A little bit like a lizard does.
Really?
They've got feathers that can fall out really easily. So it might be hit and miss. So that's something a lot of people don't know, but you'll sometimes see like pigeon feathers everywhere. It doesn't mean a pigeon has been killed. It could be it's been hit,
Yeah.
but just lost its feathers. So they've evolved for really good eruptive flight. So you can see them like sitting on the ground and suddenly being able to take off really quickly and then land somewhere else.
Yeah.
The gulls are nice. I do a lot of work on gulls. I find them beautiful species. Also the silver gull that you have here. They're intermediate species. So they flap, but it's not very expensive for them. So they have this like low flapping because they have nice long wings. But they can also soar a bit. So if they can tack in and out of the wind, a little bit like a sailboat would do. And then also fly on just like straight open wings, very inexpensive. Yeah, they're beautiful to watch.
So yeah, when you said intermediate, it's like a generalist species or opportunistic.
Yeah.
So like, why have they, like pigeons and like the silver gulls, why have their populations just?
Oh, that's a
Explain.
totally different question, and
Yeah.
I would be hesitant to answer it here
Okay.
because I don't know for the silver gulls here and the pigeons, but often it has to do with many species. That they are flexible enough to adjust their behavior to humans, so that they're not that. So that's what you see. Like you go here to the beach, and these gulls will just walk around your feet and like sit on your picnic blanket almost. So they're not afraid of us. Most birds are, and that they're more flexible in the food that they eat. So they start adapting to eating not only the natural food that they've evolved for. For silver gulls, it's probably fish here. But that they've learned to eat human food, our leftovers. And they're not afraid to come close to us. But why them and not another? Because not all gull species will do that.
No.
We don't know. Why is one species more,
they more-
adaptable than
Yeah.
others?
Would intellect be a part? Like I guess crows.
Yeah.
Well, I
so
guess it
people
has to be like
yeah.
how quickly they can breed as well, clutch sizes and
Also, yeah, exactly. Learning is part of it, right? So they have to learn. I mean, it's not easy to live in a city for a bird. They have to learn all kinds of
Yeah.
techniques, all kinds of strategies to get in and out, to move around, traffic, people, dogs.
Yeah. Oh, a million things.
A million and one
Yeah.
things, right?
I got. It's hard to like a silver gull, but they have done very well. Well, so like we talked about the great snipe flying at exceeding 8,000 meters
Yeah.
to avoid solar heating. Is that the reason why they fly so high, or is it to
That's
avoid
what
predation? Or
That's what the expectation is, at least the suggestion now, that it is probably to avoid heating.
Right.
That's the best hypothesis at the moment. We don't know for sure.
To slow
Really.
metabolism for.
No, just because they if you fly lower, I mean the same thing you feel here. You can get really really hot.
Mm.
These birds are burning a lot of energy, burning a lot of fat while they're flying. They lose a lot of water. So if they can stay cooler, then they can reduce their water loss, and that's one of the suggestions by the studies that have been done.
Right. But what about, has there been some other like extreme behaviors that you've discovered?
So there have been other studies that have shown, for example, we were talking about hitting aircraft. I think one of the, and now I don't remember the exact numbers, but one of the highest flying birds was actually identified through a bird strike. So hitting an aircraft also at 10,000 meters. So birds can get really high, but that's really not normal.
Mm.
I don't know if I've identified anything really extreme. I mean, one of the things we found with our gull work, we also do quite a lot of work on gulls, and amazed us. It doesn't sound so extreme when you're talking about a snipe flying at 8,000 meters, or these godwits crossing continents. But for example, we have these birds that have to feed their young in the summer. They have to come back to their nest. They normally feed them a few times a day. And with our GPS tracking, we found out that these birds will sometimes go from their nesting colony, it's up on an island, and fly down to Amsterdam twice a day, sometimes even. It's 80 kilometers away. It takes them 2.5 hours. And so if you start doing the math, it's like, okay, they have to fly 2.5 hours in one direction, 2.5 hours back. That's already 5 hours away from the nest. They still have to wait for food.
Mm.
And then they have to do it twice a day. So birds are really, really busy during the breeding season. Like raising, a lot of people might agree with me, raising kids can be quite difficult, but also for birds, it's hard work. And that's the kind of stuff that we can see and really study with this kind of tracking. How far do they really go? How much time do they spend searching for food?
Are they going further and further away because of, like, say, overfishing or like changes in our environment where, like, I can understand, say, like through, I know, like Greek islands and all that, the water there is quite depauperate of fish species just because
Yeah.
it's been fished out. Like, are these birds having to migrate further and further to find food?
So they're probably having to forage further away, or again, what we see in quite some gull species. We were talking about like getting used to, why do we see them? Why their populations? In some places, their populations are declining fast for many seabirds. In other places, you see populations starting to transition towards urban populations almost, because then they start changing their food and changing their diet and relying on human food because it's too hard to find fish in the ocean. That's really, I find that a really interesting change to see. So because at some point, if they have to go really far away and they can't make it back in time, there's too high a pressure of chicks being eaten by other birds, eggs overheating, things like that. So they have to find food within their spatial constraints. And if they don't, either populations decline or they start adapting, finding different resources.
What's your stance if, say, like for a conservation method to like help feed them?
Wow, that's a difficult question. So I've seen that done in a few different places,
Oh, really?
at large scale. So, for example, to reduce conflict with agriculture. So in areas where we would get large numbers of birds coming into agricultural fields and then eating seeds, trampling, things like that, people have tried strategies where you'll then feed them somewhere else so that you move the population. But what can happen is animals can start getting used to that. And then instead of like fueling up what we would normally expect during like a migration season, for example, and then moving on,
They stay.
they stay. So it's finding that balance can be really challenging. I mean, bird feeders is a big thing, especially in Europe. A lot of people have bird feeders in the winter. Good or bad, I don't know. It's not a clear answer yet. On the other hand, I think if the negative impact isn't so high, but the positive impact is that people are inspired and people care more. Like the bigger picture is that people care more, they pay more attention. Then maybe that's also what we should be looking at.
Doing that, yeah, to understand them more, to pay more attention and figuring out the best mitigation methods or best conservation methods either.
Right.
What does the orientation of a coastline my words, specifically whether it's perpendicular or parallel to a bird's flight path, change the likelihood of a bird's heading over the water.
Yeah, so we think that matters a lot in relation to the time of the night. So, for example, we have birds that are crossing. Now, without a map, it's kind of hard to imagine, but they cross from like mainland Europe to the UK. So we have a perpendicular coastline to where they want to cross. Um, and what we see on the radar, for example, also with our predictive models, is that if birds start arriving really late at night to this perpendicular coast, they will then make a decision of whether or not to cross. So if they start crossing, and there's a chance they won't make, it's too late, and very likely they won't make it
But
the next
late
day.
in the night?
In the night,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and they won't make it across before daytime. Like they'll arrive too late. That they seem to make a decision to stop at the coastline and wait.
Wow.
Birds will sometimes use the coastline to navigate along it. So sometimes if they're moving parallel to a coastline, they'll often coast along the coast. So you'll get like aggregations along a coastline because they can use it as a nice visual cue. Also at night, you can see coastlines usually really well.
Mm.
We have some areas, sometimes you see in areas where it's hard for a bird to cross perpendicular. They can sometimes follow a coastline until they hit an area where the coasts get closer together, like the ocean crossing will be shorter, and then they'll skip across.
Why would they like at least like try and avoid like a longer route across the ocean? Like, is there? I
If
can't
they
imagine.
can't land. So
Yeah,
so it's mainly again about safety. In this case, it's about safety. So a bird has to get, let's say a bird has to cross an ocean to get to the other side. They have to evolve some kind of strategy to help them get there safely. Sometimes birds can make detours and make very long crossings and like follow coastlines until they find a place, depends on the, like the orientation of the landscape, where they can make a shorter crossing, safer and easier. Or they have to pick their moments really well, that they can travel fast and across to make it like in time, whatever in time is. And we think that they don't really want to arrive during the day because then they have the risk of being hit by predators, like arriving in an area they're not familiar with. They have to find shade. They have to find a place to sleep, to roost, to find some food. So better to arrive early in the morning before all the predators come out.
Yeah.
The peregrine falcon you were talking about.
Yeah,
That's a really
yeah.
dangerous. That's
Yeah.
a really dangerous species for migratory birds.
Right. So like they're mainly flying at night, which is like I didn't think of that.
Yeah, most people don't realize that a lot of these small birds migrate at night.
Yeah. And are they, for like their whole lives then, are they like active at night?
Not at all.
So they just
It's
like,
crazy.
yeah, they just switch.
Switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just switch. And people have done experiments in the lab where you really see that they have, like if you start changing their light patterns, they'll change their behavior even in a controlled environment. So they have a biological clock, and that biological clock during the season will start changing their behavior. Like, okay, I'm now going to become let's say a nocturnal organism, but for the most part, they're diurnal. They spend the time during the day feeding and so on, moving around. And then when migration season comes, they flip and they become nocturnal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. The life of birds. Is there examples of like where aeroecological insights have influenced conservation decisions that you've been part of? Like, has this, like we've talked about how it can help, but has it actually changed policies in places?
Yes. Yeah,
Right,
it has.
okay.
Like it can really help. So when I got started in the Netherlands, for example, I was working with the military there, the Air Force, and they really use the techniques that we use to monitor where birds are moving and when in large numbers, and they change their flight plans and their training to also reduce the risk of a conflict between birds and aircraft. So that's been going on for a very long time already. In the field of wind energy, what's being done in the Netherlands is that using our predictive models, they make decisions about whether or not to curtail the turbines. So basically, they slow the turbines down to very, very slow rotations. They don't completely shut them off. And the idea being that at those moments when you have very large numbers of birds passing through, you can reduce the risk of collision. And so they're really using the science in their policy. And that's fantastic. Like not just policy, but in action. So it's actually being done each migration season now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's amazing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's really exciting to be part of that.
yeah, definitely. And where do you see like the next steps for applying these things? Like what would be just
Yeah.
applying that logic and those models to more and more areas?
To more areas to, I think, what I've seen, what I think is challenging is that policy can be really, really slow, and decision making can be very, very hard. So with this curtailment procedure in the Netherlands, it's bound in a lot of legal documents, a lot of decisions that are being made with a lot of partners. Um, I hope that at some point these kind of things can become a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more flexible because, people want answers, but you know that the answers won't be the same in every single location. They
Mm.
won't necessarily need the same exact strategies. You have to do some research beforehand to understand a little bit about the distributions. But as we start getting more knowledge, you can start working at different tiers, right? You can start developing like baseline knowledge of, okay, what are the general altitudes? Where are most of the birds in the air? Okay, this is a dangerous airspace. What time of year is it problematic? And then can we make decisions based on that time of year? So it's a little bit different from, let's say, terrestrial conservation, where you say, oh, this is a national park in this space, and this space is fixed.
Mm.
In the airspace, you can think a little bit more dynamically that the choices that you make don't have to be the same 24/7. At night, we have a bigger problem than we have during the day. So let's change our decision making during those times. Or in this airspace, things are different than if you fly like at higher altitudes. So it's a different mindset. So you need to go towards something like dynamic conservation.
Mm. When you're saying you're switching from like more the wind turbines like more active at during the day than at night, it's quite hard though because then like if you've got raptor species that are
Of
flying above,
course.
like where
Yeah.
do you choose like what is
So that's where you need a lot of people around the
like who do you
table.
save?
Who do you save? Yeah. You can't save everyone, right? So there's
Mm.
going to be some loss. And then I think it's about deciding in a particular, and that's why it needs to be dynamic, right?
Mm.
Deciding in a particular area what is the most important, for what reasons in this location. Because yeah, you can't turn off turbines for the entire migration season, for example. That's much too
Mm.
long. So that's why we're trying to predict these peak moments.
Or
Same
even
thing for raptors. You can't say, okay, I'm going to constantly turn off my turbines every nice day of the year, because here that's what, 300 days a year,
mm.
340 days a year also wouldn't work. So you can also think about spatial planning. Are there areas that are really sensitive? Are there particular times of day or flight routes? Is there a conservation species that we're really worried about? Should we target that one first with our mitigation measures?
Mm.
And those are decisions that can be taken based on the science, based on the evidence that we have, based on and moving forward, right? So as you learn more, you can adapt those decisions that you've made. That's
Mm.
that's why it would be great if it could be dynamic, because we're learning so fast. There's so many things we don't know yet.
So I'm gonna jump way back talking
Yeah.
about like flight paths and or migratory highways. There's obviously high spots located, and that's generally for food, or food or breeding
Hmm.
grounds. Is there like dark spots? I don't know what the opposite word, but
Yeah,
like, is there just areas like
that's
where there's just
fantastic.
nothing?
Nothing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's a great question. Yes, there are like cold spots or dark spots,
Yeah.
or so we've been starting to look at that actually. That's really funny that you asked it in that in that way. So, for example, this nocturnal migration, right? These are all these small songbirds that move at night. And the expectation has always been that they just fly in, just like imagine just some kind of smooth carpet of birds. They're all equally spaced, and they're just moving over the landscape because it doesn't matter. It's at night. So we've now been taking these radar images and kind of stacking them on top of each other to try and see, like, are there dark spots? Are there hot spots even at night? And you can see that there are. So even at night, they start following a little bit landscape features, or some areas they avoid. Certainly during the day, you definitely see this. So birds that are using this kind of soaring flight, for example, they need very specific landscape features. Areas that are really wet don't create this uplift. So those are always cold
Mm.
spots for those birds. In the Netherlands, we have areas that are really wet all the time. So we see that like gulls, when they soar, they never go over those areas because they can't soar.
Mm.
So yeah, you definitely get like cold spots, hot spots, for sure, especially with large soaring birds during migration. You get really clear streams of flight. They're really flying like really routes.
Would that be areas then that should be like where you could put wind turbines? Or is it because now
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
wet
yeah.
spots, there's not as much wind movement. So,
So it depends on the species. So there are areas where, yeah, the two will definitely start colliding, right?
mm,
Where, and we've seen this with gulls, that gulls like really windy areas, and those are really nice areas for wind turbines, right? So wind turbines have to be in areas where you have a lot of wind.
mm,
They don't necessarily have to be an area with a lot of thermal convection, for example. So you could have conditions where the two, like where birds are searching for the same conditions that you need for your turbines, and then you might have areas of higher risk. But if you know that, then you can decide, okay, those are areas where maybe we want to shut the turbines off now and then. And in other areas where we think, okay, these are cold spots, not interesting for birds, then you don't have to worry about it as much.
mm. Is there birds that like a particular niche, that like that particular niche of cold spots, like a certain species is only found in those
Ah,
areas? Or
yeah, there must be. Like, of course,
yeah,
water birds. So you'll find water birds, right, and that are all in these big wetlands, marshes, and
mm,
so on. Um, they're often in areas where, especially if these are really, really large areas, where you won't see these very big raptors that need the soaring flight. They can't, because they
mm.
can't use the same. They don't use the same kind of conditions. So yeah, you do have opposites sometimes.
Yeah, okay. Do you have a favorite bird?
Oh my God, I hate that question. I feel
Yeah.
like if I do that, all the birds are insulted.
We were just
But
filming some underwater stuff with fish, and I just, as I was like speaking to the videographer, I kept saying, it's like, "Oh, that's one of my favorite fish," and
yeah,
he's like, "You've told me about 20 different fish species.
exactly.
One of your favorite?" Like, "Oh yeah, true."
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly. What is my favorite? What is my favorite? I'm like an octopus. Oh no, it's not a fish.
Yeah.
No, I often go back to white storks because that's what I did my PhD on.
Okay.
And they're
Yeah.
really, I find them so beautiful. It's like this big, large, elegant black and white bird with red legs and a red bill. They're beautiful soarers.
Mm.
They're beautiful to watch soaring, migrate in large numbers. Yeah, they're probably my favorite, but I don't know. It's not
Did,
fair to have a
yeah.
favorite.
No, it's
It's
in
not
the.
right.
I usually say like a top 5.
Yeah, it's
They're
in
in the
my
top
top
5, but
five.
the top
Yeah.
5 may be 10. But
Exactly, maybe more.
they
And then now I'm
rotate.
here in Australia, and I'm like, oh wow, you have some really nice species
Yeah.
here.
Well, one of my favorite ones is the splendid fairy wren, which
Oh my
when
God,
you,
I've seen one. What
yeah,
a beautiful. So, okay, so I saw one for the first time. I saw a male, and I was like, oh, if I would give that bird a name, it would be something like a fairy bird or something. Like I was
yeah.
thinking, like, this is just, what is this bird? And then I asked someone, like, yeah, it's a splendid fairy wren. I'm like, that is the perfect name for that bird.
Yeah, they are. So I think there's 5 species of fairy wrens with that go blue. It's only the males go blue, and they only go
Yeah.
blue during breeding season. They also live in like a social group, and they will never know. Like the birds themselves don't know who's like the paternal father of the chicks. So
Ah,
they live
okay.
together. So they all
Yeah, yeah.
they all work together to feed, and they also specialize on feeding on certain things. So one would like specialize on feeding on moths. One would specialize feeding
Really?
on flies.
How cool.
Within that group, so they get
It's
like
great. So they get a mixed diet, a good, healthy mixed
a
diet.
mixed diet because of their group.
That is really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like found like I love those birds, and I think it's partly because growing up on the farm, we had a lot of those splendid fairy wrens in the garden, and like so every morning when we're sitting there having breakfast,
Yeah.
like I remember just myself and my cousins and my grandparents would be staring out the windows like, oh,
Yeah.
the fairy wrens, and like they would ebb and flow with their populations due to how many cats and foxes were around.
Around.
But
Yeah. Is that not cool though, that you have like a
mm,
bird that's like, it gives you a sense of place? I think a lot for a lot of it,
yeah.
you might not realize, it, and then you think about like, oh yeah, so for you that might be like home. If you see a wren, it gives you like, oh, this is.
Very interesting you say that. So I found this out the other day on a podcast with Rochelle Stevens. On this podcast, we did birds. Have you met Rochelle here yet?
No, I
No,
haven't.
she researches birds more in the ecotourism area. Very, very interesting. But she mentioned on that podcast that kookaburras. So they're a introduced species for Western Australia,
Okay.
native to Australia, but they brought them over to Western Australia because of their iconic sound. So when you were talking earlier about waking up to the sounds of parakeets, it's
Yeah.
like becomes that iconic. So they moved them, they translocated them to Western Australia to try get more East Coast people to move to Western
That
Australia.
is so ridiculous. That's so
That's the
crazy.
only reason they
That is
brought
so
them
funny.
over.
But Europeans did the same thing. They brought like birds over to America, the same, like just to feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
So apparently it is a really deep thing. You know, you're in a place and you're like, oh yeah, I hear, like if the seasons are changing and you see a bird arriving. But it's really, I don't know. I find it always touching when you hear that from people, like, oh yeah, that's my bird, that's my garden bird, or that's the
Yeah. Well, like my
kookaburras. I actually didn't know they did that. That's really funny.
yeah, it is. They are causing havoc for a lot of our native fauna
Okay.
as well.
Yeah.
So it's not quite. Yeah, it hasn't quite worked out as like
No, as they
I don't really
hoped.
know any translocation or introduction of species has
That's a
ever
good
been a good
thing.
thing. Like,
No, no. So I heard that so I was really excited about seeing the rainbow lorikeets, and then I was told, oh no, but those are also
yeah,
invasive. Yeah,
yeah,
from
yeah.
the east.
I know. Very. Yeah. It's. I don't know the reason for them, but it's probably the same thing. Maybe.
Who
And
knows?
who
Yeah.
knows? Yeah. But yeah, then yeah, I guess that's that's what humans
That's what
do.
people do.
I know.
Exactly.
I know, and you can't really like eradicate those problems.
No.
But thank you so much for coming in today. This has been amazing. I think you're my first international guest on the podcast.
Oh,
As well,
cool. I'm
so-
honored. That's really great. I've had a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
yeah, it's been fantastic. You've got a wealth of knowledge, and it's been so insightful to learn from you. And I hope this is helps a lot of other people as well, and it inspires another generation and wherever it goes. But yeah, thank you so
Hope
much
so.
for coming to join.
Thanks a lot.
Paramount importance. This production was recorded at the podcast studios in the Media Arts Centre at Murdoch University. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Murdoch University. Any content provided by the hosts and guests are their personal opinions and are not intended to represent the views or opinions of the university, its administration, faculty, or staff.